You are now tuned into Flipping the Birds, a Philly Sports Network podcast.
What's going on, Eagles fans? Welcome one, welcome all to another episode of Flipping the Birds.
He's into the end zone. Touchdown, Eagles.
What's going on, everybody? Hopefully you can hear me this time as I do the intro, because the last time I tried to do the intro, you guys couldn't hear me. So I might have actually gotten it right this time. I'm not sure. Brian,
I think you did.
Probably
I think you nailed it.
somewhere so proud of me.
I think you nailed it. I can hear you. So
All right,
I think you heard half of that part.
I mean, we had to get something right because, unfortunately, perfect segue for the Eagles, not much is going right. Unfortunately, we kind of got to talk about the Giants game a little bit, but then we're going to talk about playoffs and, hopefully keep it a little bit positive for you guys. There's still some hope. They still made the playoffs, and, hey, if there's anything we know for sure, anything can happen in the playoffs. So it's one game at a time. The Eagles might have a chance here, but obviously, not a great way to end the season. But how are you feeling about the season as a whole? That's what I want to know. Now that's all said and done, what kind of energy did it give off? What kind of vibe you feeling going into the playoffs?
I want to sit here and just sort of believe that if they get healthy, if everybody like returning players against the Buccaneers is going to truly matter and it's going to click that game. But I don't believe that because it's been 17 weeks of me saying maybe it'll click, and it hasn't clicked. I feel the whole body of work, the whole regular season, it's been completely underwhelming. You can say every bit of praise, you can twist every bit of praise out of the top 10 offense. Didn't really seem it in most cases, and this defense, personnel wise, was never going to work, and then scheme wise, it got worse. So yeah, I in my mind is the easiest way to say it is here's the record they finished with, right? Because I've said it so many times. Here's the record they finished with, and here's what I see them, and I have to be. It's harsh because 11-6 is obviously what they finished with. That's what what they earned, but and earned can that features luck, and I'm never going to die. I'm never going to get off that hill as far as there's no luck involved. But the 11-6, man, you finish with that record. This team looked a lot more 8-9 to me.
Yeah,
so,
honestly,
that's where I'm at.
Yeah, no, I think they're right, and it's interesting. We're kind of used to the Eagles heading into the playoffs as underdogs, as all the talk is that they didn't play up to their record. And now we're in a case where they really didn't, and it doesn't sit well. I think that a lot of the changes that were made in season are coming back to haunt them. I just don't see how any of those changes really you kind of internalize and say, okay, well that's the new way to adjust going forward. Because the NFL is a copycat league, and I don't think anyone's going to look at the Eagles and what they did this year and go, okay, that was the right response, that was the right answer. So it's a bit worrying that way. I think that's what we're kind of used to is okay, the Eagles painted themselves into a hole. How do they get out of it? And they usually have a response. Whereas this year, it just seems like all the responses were kind of wrong, especially after an early on season where we kind of praised them for that. We're halftime adjustments and all those things where they were kind of getting creative. It just seems like as a whole, a lot of the decisions they made and a lot of adjustments they made them a worse team. And so not a whole bunch to feel great about, but I think what you said is still correct. Is there's still a lot of talent on this team, and if they figure it out and if they can click going into the playoffs, granted, none of these games are going to be easy, but you don't ever really expect any playoff games to be easy. So at this point, hey, you got 4 quarters, and you are straight up better than most of the teams you're playing in on paper. Obviously, injuries, and we'll talk about that. Some unfortunate injuries, but straight up, you're better than most teams you're going to play in the playoffs on paper. So as long as you can limit the mistakes that you've been making, which seem uncharacteristic, but there's been so many of them that you kind of wonder if this is the new norm, unfortunately. But if you limit those, you kind of have a chance. And it doesn't matter when the whistle blows what the score is, as long as you're on top. So, there's still some hope, I feel like. But, yeah, a weird taste in your mouth as you kind of leave that season and look back at it.
And it's crazy because in the same vein where I can sit there and say, man, they really played like 8 and 9, like I can also say at the optimum, if they did figure this, thing out back when they were, 10 and 1, this is a team that you can still sit there and say, well, dang, I mean, this is an 11 and 6 team that could have been, at optimum, probably 15 and 2.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
17 results. Yeah. 15 and 2. But then again, maybe not. Maybe maybe it's more so 14 and 3 because you do have that luxury of like not really caring against this Giants game where it mattered to a point.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's just been so many things where you should not be entering the postseason looking at the talent that's on this team going, dang, what is this team still? That should not be a question, with a postseason berth and one that's where you're just basically arguing about seeding over the past month.
Yeah, and we have an interesting question in the chat, not to completely change the subject, but I feel like it factors in, and I think this is a great question. This is kind of the biggest worry for me, outside of the coaching staff and then some of the decisions is on field. You see some of the leaders in the locker room not really stepping up to the plate. And unfortunately, one of those that's, making a lot of noise, not necessarily with his words, but just with his actions, is AJ Brown. And I'm curious to hear kind of your opinions on how that's affecting the locker room. It just seems like that chemistry that he and Jalen had, like, it just seems like the ship is supposed to be kind of going in the same direction with everyone, but you get one guy kind of steering it a bit left and steering it a bit right, and now they're kind of going in a lot of different directions. I don't think he's entirely negative, AJ Brown, but I think there is kind of a disconnect. How do you feel about that?
No, there's absolutely disconnect, and there wouldn't be a disconnect, like, right. So in this example, it's in his presser or when he does speak, he says that they improvised. He and Hurts improvised on that final deep throw against Seattle.
Yep.
And one side of that, you can sit there and go, well, you have to do what the coaches call, and then you have to execute that play, and that's on the player. And there is a certain amount of responsibility where that makes total sense. But ask yourself this: why did they feel that that they have to deviate from an offensive game plan? Like, why?
Yeah.
What is the question as to, like, hey, at the end of the day, Gainwell is still sitting there wide open, probably for 30 yards, and it's a whole momentum shift, and things might end differently. But the idea that you hear the play, like, to me, when I look at a star player and obviously a star quarterback, and they're obviously going out of their way because they admitted to it and saying, hey, we're gonna do this instead, right? Like basically backyard football type of deal. In my mind, it sounds like the huddle went quarterback draw, and they were just like, no, that's stupid as hell, or like a screenplay, and like AJ's like, yeah, screen, but like 30 yards downfield, like like it's almost as if you look at a coach and you're just like, you got to be kidding me with this, and they finally had it. And I don't think that he's a disruption, because I think what is the disruption is the adjustments that haven't been fixed. I
Right.
think that's the overlying issue. Like, yeah, you can sit there and you can talk about like how bummed people feel in the locker room. Yeah, I bet you would be bummed too if you
Mhm.
were supposed to be the the favorites to represent the NFC in a Super Bowl, and that you lost 6 out of your last 7.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you would be bummed too. But here's the thing, that mounts since like maybe week 5, when you're sitting there going, man, we haven't really put it together yet. We haven't played our best game yet. The thing is, your best game might not ever come, and that's an issue.
Yeah, 100%. No, and I think that kind of has been the opinion that I have as well, is that I think that one of the biggest problems is that all of these problems are solvable. the issue is not the problem itself, but when you're dealing with it. It's just that can't happen when you're in week 14, 15, 16 is like, and we'll talk about the defense going forward and the offense too, but that's what it seems like to me is a lot of these issues that are coming forward, like you said, like should have been addressed in weeks 4 and week 5. Like I would much rather the Eagles have lost some games early in the season and figured it out. Like we kind of were waiting and noticing these little leaks, right? These little cracks in the pipe. And then all of a sudden it just like burst open and there's this huge flow of negative problems and they're trying to solve them. And even if it is like a little bit of scapegoating for AJ Brown, like the thing for me is I don't understand you 1 week saying, okay, we're changing the play call. And then the next week saying we need to trust the coaching staff more. And like, that is fair. Okay. Like I like the fact that he's self-correcting and understanding, but that message is very contradictory. Even
Right.
if you're going, okay, I learned from my mistake. It's like you are not a first year, second year guy. Right, like trusting the coaches is not something new to you. Like even at Ole Miss, like you weren't just allowed to do what you wanted to do, and even if you were, I guarantee you, when you're playing for the Titans, they weren't allowing much improvisation. You know what I mean? Like somehow he got 1,000-yard season with Derrick Henry just running the ball. So like this kind of thing isn't new to him, and at some point, I think it's on Sirianni to say, hey, listen, man, like we are the coaches, like. Regardless of what you think about the coaching staff, like it's just a weird power dynamic. And at some point, as good as these players are, they have to understand they're players. And I think that the line that Sirianni is kind of creating in the atmosphere, it's really positive and a lot of lights. But then also there's that kind of flip side of like, okay, like you've given your players way too much power. And now it's kind of coming back to bite you. And that's a fine realization to have, just not in week 16, 17, right? Like those problems need to be solved. And again, like, we'll kind of talk about the scheming and the game planning, but like this kind of seems to be a microcosm of what's going on with the Eagles is they're having week 4 problems in week 17.
Yeah, and part of having those week 4 problems this deep has to do with making those switches, putting Patricia in as the guy that's going to set those schemes when you went through however many weeks of the size schemes, and now you're asking the defense to do things that that's not their strengths. Like and everybody's point to it, the Hassan Reddick and coverage. Everybody's pointed to that, but it's true. It's like, why in the hell would you ever do that? Like he's your premier pass rusher to on this team, and it's not a secret, by the way. He was one of your premier pass rushers in a Super Bowl appearance season.
Yep.
So now you want him to pass coverage. Like I get trying a different look here and there, but not nearly to even the snaps percentages. Even if it's low, I mean, it needs to be lower. And in the scheme, you need to play to the strengths. There's no reason why, like, all right, as far as having the ball run all down the Eagles recently, it probably has to do a lot with the rush not being there amongst the line, and setting off in the backfield, and these running backs having all day long to make a move and to read what's going on. You're not going to have linebackers, especially in Philadelphia, that are going to be taking over any game and anytime soon. And you know if the thing is, if Arizona can do it, and you're looking at New York, and New York obviously blew the doors off of Philadelphia, yeah, you can sit there and say Philadelphia, oh, they found out the way to beat the Bucs. Yeah, those Bucs, like the Week 4 Bucs. Yeah, all right, but those Bucs, while they're apparently, I didn't watch the game, but apparently they had a hard time with Carolina. They didn't look good. And so that's kind of the conversation that I'm hearing in the morning these days. I'm just like, yeah, but like, name a time where Philadelphia looked good over the past like month and a half. Like, I'll take one bad game over like a consistent trend of just awful.
Yeah.
And I know, so I don't have like a lot of, so spoiler alert, I don't have a lot of faith.
Yeah, I mean, and we're gonna get into like Tampa Bay and stuff like that, but I think it's a really fair point of you mentioned like not putting your players in positions to succeed, and I think like one of the things that's been circulating, there's a play that they ran against the Giants where you have Josh Sweat dropping into coverage, and he's supposed to be manning up the 3-man, and like this just like. Again, without me even explaining the defense, and you don't even have to know that much about football, like you could have, probably a 10-year-old kid watching, like, okay, you got Josh Sweat on a number 3 receiver, which for the Giants, a lot of the times is Wan'Dale Robinson. That's just a mismatch. Like you just have to understand, like on paper, you shouldn't do that. And that's not, you don't have to be an NFL DC. You don't have to be a high school DC. You don't have to be a middle school DC. You don't put a guy who outweighs another guy by 60 pounds in coverage on a third and, medium to long. Like it just doesn't make sense. And I think that, kind of we'll transition into the Giants game and kind of talk about the season as a whole. This is the issue is one, either there's a clear misunderstanding of who your personnel is, or you just don't care. And both of those problems are pretty significant problems. And I think like one of the things you can do once you get into a defense and get later in the season is, okay, you realize Josh Sweat is in a bad position, and let's switch the defense. Let's have an audible. Let's do something here where, okay, like that, we notice that is a recognizable problem, and we'll switch it. The problem is like it's coming out is Patricia put an entirely new system in with new terminology, with new checks, with probably even just new technique within the scheme. And now again, like we're talking about, okay, they're having week 4 problems in week 17. They're literally running a week 4 defense in week 17. And then Patricia is trying to compensate by making like really, really difficult situations. Like you're putting your players in bad situations to compensate for the fact that you are installing what should have been installed in week 4, week 5, now in week 16, 17. Like it doesn't work. Like, again, I don't know that much about like NFL defensive coordinators positions or anything like that. But if I'm coming into that position knowing I have all that talent on that defense, I'm keeping it simple, right? I'm allowing my players to do what they can. And we're seeing the opposite. We're seeing guys be forced to do this and that. We talked about the improvisation on the offense, and maybe that's the problem. I almost wish the defense would start improvising because clearly the play calls are not working, and they're just putting their players in bad positions. But the problem is with that improvisation, with the checks, like the players don't know it. You can tell when you're watching this that they are learning a new defense, and that should never happen in the NFL. Like you should never be able to look at a screen and go, okay, that's new to them. And it's just so obvious and so evident sometimes that it's just like you kind of feel like banging your head against the TV because DC should know better. Like this again, like he's not. Again, I know he's had problems in the past, but he's not new to this, right?
No, not at all.
So he should know better. And I think that moving on from Desai, unfortunately, exposed some personnel issues. But what it did realistically is it hit a big reset button with 5 weeks to go left in the season, right? And that's just hard to come back from.
One of the big things that you said there was keeping it simple on defense, and from what I've understood, is that was kind of a detriment to Desai. He had plans for if this, then do that, and that, then do that. It's like overthinking. Okay,
Sure. Yeah.
but if so, like I would rather have a plan than and like and just kind of, okay, you have to learn that, and maybe that's maybe that's not how you catch on in year 1, because quite frankly, I don't think the personnel was going to be stellar in year 1, especially with Desai, who didn't really have the the background, if you will, in the NFL or doing anything really with defense. Now, if you're going to soft fire, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to call it with Desai, you should, right? And ideally, I know Patricia would have his own schemes because he did his work previously elsewhere. But why wouldn't you just go, here's what Desai's been doing. How can I simplify what Desai did? And like not really integrate my stuff yet until the all season. Because if you can do that at a better, at a better I guess at a better consistency with this team, then that might even and this is probably with the silver lining here is that he didn't do it this way, because if he does come in and he keeps it simple and the Eagles like are making improvements and whatnot, then maybe you have this fool's goal where it's like, we'll bring Patricia back next year. You know what? I was just thinking about this when you were talking about the coordinators too. And there's just another idea about like what happens if the postseason if they were to lose to the Bucs. Honestly, it might be a fantastic, like, obviously they're not going to fucking go out there and like throw the game, like, right? Obviously, you're going to go out there and compete. You're going to do what you need to do, but there would be some sort of benefit to if the Eagles were bounced out like one and done, because then they would be able to actually speak with coaches and they wouldn't have to get that, that delay. And to me, you look at the Titans, you look at Vrabel, and I'm just like, dog,
Yeah.
get Vrabel. I would love Mike Vrabel in Philly.
Yeah, Wink Martindale is another good option that just stepped
that
away. I
too.
don't know if he's stepping away for good or not, but there's definitely some options for DC. Like, but I think like what you're talking about brings up an interesting question is, if they do kind of win some games and make a little playoff run, like the fool's gold you're talking about could like for me I've never really seen it before. But essentially, Patricia's figured out a way to get fired as a DC in 5 games. Like, and that, like, realistically, like, you can't let him continue after what he's shown you, unless, like, I don't even know what would have to happen in the playoffs for you to retain. I mean, either of these guys. Like, I just don't see Desai sticking around after what happened. Like, and I think it honestly is unfortunate because I don't think he was ready for that DC role, but I don't think he's a terrible coach. I think he needs more time as a positional coach potentially. Right. Maybe one of those positions where it's like that defensive quality control assistant where he's having some hand and maybe he's even calling plays at some point. So like I don't think he's a terrible coach. I just don't think he was really ready for the role he got. But I mean Patricia, like you can't let that guy stick around in your facility, right, for the next year. But if they win a couple games, I feel like that's almost unprecedented for you to then fire that guy. Like I really hope it happens, but you beat Tampa Bay, most likely you're going to San Fran, right? If you beat San Fran, then right, like you can you fire your coach, like your coordinators?
No, I mean the worst part about doing that, because obviously you want that to happen, but the worst part about that is any gripe that you have with any one of these coaches are all safe. Every last one of them are safe. If you get into the NFC Championship and by God you make a Super Bowl appearance, everybody's safe. And that might be the biggest headache because then everybody's older and it's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. It's like this is it. This is boomer bust right now because this is. I mean, in my mind, it's just after the result of whatever happens and however deep Philadelphia goes in this postseason, it's a rebuild.
Right.
That's
right.
this is boomer bust. This is literally the definition of that phrase.
Yeah, I mean, like I think I don't know, like if I'm putting on my GM hat. I think you there's no way you don't retain Sirianni. I think he's here to stay. I really like, it wasn't that we're not that far removed from kind of singing his praises for the energy he brings to Philly and how well he fits Philly. Like I think again, like there's a little bit of a power struggle there that's going on. And I don't even think he fully realizes it because I don't think it's like an overarching power struggle. I don't think that it's rearing its head with, big muscles and taking over the room. I think it's just like the little details, little space that he leaves for his players to take, you know what I mean? Like it's coming into cracks, right? Which, he talked about literally like using a quote from him, talk about stuff flowering out of the cracks and stuff like that. And I think that what he has here is there's a couple of little indications that he's losing control of some parts of that locker room. But I don't think that's anything out of his control. I think the issue is that he's been given, and I don't know how much say he had in the hiring process or how much say he had in bringing in Patricia, or, he says like, again, like now that AJ came out and said that, like he took kind of the blame for that last minute call. Like, I don't know how much of the blame he's taking for Howie's decisions on hiring, for example. Like, I don't know if it was ever Sirianni's decision to bring in Patricia, but of course he's going to say like, yes, that was part of my decision. But I think, you have to kind of let him do a better job, because when he was coming in as a first year coach, had a great staff, picked a great staff, fantastic staff, right? So I don't think there's any issue with him evaluating the staff. It seems to me like he almost got stuck with these guys and he's doing damage control. But there's like, you talk about the chemistry on field. I don't see the chemistry off field. Like I do not see Sirianni and Desai kind of getting along. I definitely do not see Sirianni and Patricia really getting along. Like, and you start that at the top, it's only going to trickle down. And again, like I think that as a whole, there's not like a cancer in the locker room. There's not like a big problem in the locker room, but it's those things are starting to trickle down and create little cracks. And And like you said, if that kind of continues, you're at a make or break situation where you should have been set up for the next 3 to 5 years, where you're essentially a perennial Super Bowl, at least like a playoff contender. And if this goes south now, you're looking at the Cowboys winning the division for the next couple of years, and you not
or maybe somebody else at this rate. I don't know.
Who knows? Who knows, right?
Maybe the Commanders.
But you're at a fine line, like you said, you're at a fine line between 11-6 and 8-9, and 8-9 in this division that's constantly changing could wind you up in 4th place, right?
Right.
So
that's
it's
absolutely fair. I mean, here's one of the things that I keep going back to is the choices that the Philadelphia Eagles had at defensive coordinator. You had Desai, obviously that evolved, or I don't know, devolved, parallel moved, or whatever. I don't know what you really call it at the end of the day to Matt Patricia. I call it almost a devolve, but we spoke about, like, is it fair to Patricia that I call it like a devolve, or is that brand new scheme so it's going to look awful anyhow? That's neither here or there. It's just
still kind of on him though, right? Like it's still he's the boss. He didn't have to bring that scheme and make those changes.
No, that is absolutely true. So I mean, so you had those two, but the third name was going to be like Vic Fangio, and I was like, well, geez, when you look back, it's like none of them. Like literally, I don't ever feel like there was going to be. Oh my God, my lights are flashing. There was going to be a good answer for a defensive coordinator heading into the season, because those are the 3 names I keep thinking of. If there's one that's slipping my mind, I mean, I'm more than happy to hear about it. But those are the 3 that I always keep going back to. So it's kind of like, wow, we really needed the personnel to be fire on defense, and to that, so with the preparation headed into this season, knowing that those are maybe your 3 options, and then with the contracts and the players that you let walk, I mean, if you're Howie, who really takes on the brunt? Is it the lack of preparation defensive coordinators because, Gannon's gone and left you high and dry? That part sucks too. Or is it like, okay, well, we just thought we could run it back with a, let's face it, old team?
Yeah, and I think that, to his credit, how he did a good job of kind of refinishing the team, giving it a little like younger facelift with the draft, and that's fantastic. But I think that it's been a while since so many key players on the Eagles defense, especially, have been that young and been rookies. And I think we're kind of used to Howie's response being to bring in the vets, and he tried to do that. And we can talk about Kevin Byard, but might go down as kind of a miss, unfortunately. Like, I think he's a great player, and I think he had a lot to contribute to this defense, but maybe the playoffs is when he shines. And I kind of want to use that as because it is fair. We're getting this comment in the chat, and that's fair. We don't want to be bummers here. Obviously, we want to kind of, be reasonable and be realists. There's definitely some things going on under the hood, but we're still driving here. We're still driving a car. We still got 2 hands on the wheel. We're still making the playoffs. We're playing against a team that really realistically is beatable any day of the week. Like, the Eagles on paper can beat this team. So, I mean, let's kind of transition into maybe some of the positives going into the playoffs. Like, again, the scheme is an issue, but I think there's a lot to be said for. I mean, Brian kind of brought this theory of
I saw it and I hate it, but go ahead.
Yeah, but they're kind of slum dogging it into the playoffs, and like, I mean, I think my response would be like, that would be the greatest heist of the century. But I do think there's something to be said for the fact that like you said earlier, the Eagles haven't played their best game yet,
right?
And there is nothing to be said that the next game can't be their best game. Some of those issues we're talking about have to be addressed, but if you get this team rocking and rolling, again, like I said, it doesn't matter what the score is at the end of the day. You just have to win. And this is a team that you wouldn't know it from the last 6 weeks, but has a number of comeback wins on like this year even. Like, Jalen Hurts at one point was, I don't know if he was leading, but he was like top 3, top 2 in comeback wins. This team can come back. They know how to do it. I think they just need a little reminder. And the other thing, obviously, we talked about is the coaches need to get out of the way. Like, they just let the players play. Again, we kind of talked about that imbalance with Sirianni on the offense, but shoot, if you are going to let them freestyle, then, you have the personnel to do it. And when you're freestyling, that's kind of how it goes. It's 50-50. And so if the Eagles are able to hit that 50 that works, this is a really scary team going into the playoffs. Unfortunately, lost Sidney Brown to injury. That's a big deal. AJ's nicked up, obviously Devontae missed the last game. Swift missed the last game. They should both be fine. So you're getting a lot of pieces. You're relatively healthy. If this team plays up to the potential, they could be a scary team going into the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, and that's really it too, right? Like it's the potential. Like we always have looked at this team and said, like, they could do damage. That's how we felt for the first 11, 12 weeks is, still comfortable.
All right, I think Eric froze. For those of you that don't know, we're both. Well, I mean, most of you should be in Philly, but I don't know. But where I am and where Eric is, we're both getting hit with a storm. So I think Eric cutting in and out. Luckily, my storm came earlier in the day. We're not losing power, but yeah, I mean, just kind of talking about the chances the Eagles have. And again, I get it. On paper, it doesn't mean anything. That's a good point. I'll toss that out because this is a really good point. On paper doesn't mean anything, but I think there's a little more to it than that. Like I think that the Eagles definitely have shown that they're able to adjust and absolutely right. A lot of that was, I think, Desai's adjustments, but Desai's still in house, right? And if he decides, unlike Jonathan Gannon did last year before the Super Bowl when he decided he was already going to Arizona, he could still be a contributing member. And I think that at some point, everyone in that locker room, players and coaches, kind of have to put their pride aside and say, hey, listen, we have an opportunity here to go win a playoff game. And we've been kind of waiting as fans for that wake-up call. And we thought it was coming, maybe the Seahawks game was it, or maybe the first Giants when it was close, maybe even the first Washington game, right, when it was close. We were kind of waiting for that, kind of kicking the pants just to get them started, and maybe the playoffs is it, right? And maybe this is the next game. And again, being a fan and being a realist, and obviously having this show, we want to give you kind of a realist perspective, but I think realistically, there's a very good chance the Eagles win. Now, that kind of gets into what Eric and I were talking about earlier is if you win this game and then you go on to San Francisco, a very, very difficult opponent, probably even with the Ravens loss, again, they might still be the best team in the league. And, obviously if you go beyond that, you're facing most likely Dallas, unless, they run in, they've had issues with Green Bay in the playoffs before. Dallas is always doing Dallas things. But both of those teams have had the Eagles number this year. Obviously the Eagles beat Dallas the first matchup, but I think, right now the Dallas is definitely playing better football. But you have an opportunity here to beat Tampa Bay because I think, outside of some Baker Mayfield magic, which he's been producing at quite a click over the last couple of weeks. But outside of that, I think that the Eagles are well equipped to deal with this Tampa Bay defense if they play the football that we know they're capable of playing. So I think, again, just to kind of, have a little positivity, I think that there is definitely a potential for the Eagles to make at least a one-game run into the playoffs. But I think, again, great points. Duck's kind of on fire today. Again, we're trying to keep it positive, but you're absolutely right. Being a realist, I think that some of these problems that the Eagles have been having. Yeah, I talked about the storm. We're good. I mean,
dude, it conquered me.
Yeah. I mean, you probably shouldn't be downloading all those illegal movies on the other screen, but we get it.
Yeah.
The Wi-Fi cuts out. Anyways, but yeah, I was just talking about how essentially, again, even on paper, like Duck said, it doesn't mean anything. On paper doesn't mean anything, but I think beyond that, you realistically still have an opportunity here to find that juice, to find that magic that you had early on in the season. And we were waiting for the Eagles to kind of get that kick in the pants. We thought it might have been the first Washington game, might have been the second Washington game, might have been the Seahawks game, might have been so many games along the line. It just didn't happen. So maybe this playoff, maybe that's the threshold that they needed to kind of go, okay, are we going to do this or not? Right. And talking about the halftime adjustments that were happening early and all that stuff, and Desai's still in the building, right? So there's still the right minds in-house, I believe, to kind of go, okay, let's put our pride aside and win a playoff game. So, I think there's reasons to believe the Eagles can win this. I wouldn't blame anyone for feeling a little nervous, though.
No, that's sort of where I'm at on these things. Like, of course, I'm going to be nervous with every possible matchup because the reality is, the reality is Drew Lock and the Seahawks. The reality is the Cardinals in general. The reality is Tyrod Taylor and the Giants. The reality is the Jets. Like going the back where where this wasn't a streak of just errors, pretty much. So even when they were hitting on what it looked like all cylinders as far as this season is concerned, there's an opportunity for turnovers to get in the way, and that's just football. But I can accept that. Unfortunately, I can accept when there's turnovers because for the most part, that's just a lack of execution on a play that might have worked versus like plays that like probably weren't going to work along with the lack of execution. Like at least you're giving you got to give your team two fists to have a chance, pretty much, for fighting chance. So with the way that I look at going into this game here, I would love for Sirianni to have everybody on the same page, for the offense to be on the same page, because that's where I really think a lot of this weight is going to be carried, is with the offense. The defense probably going to be there along for the ride. I would just like to see them step up in some situations. Really, that's where I'm looking for situational play. I'm not even looking for the defense to conquer a game because I don't think it's going to happen.
Sure.
But in that scenario, like Tampa Bay, do I think? I mean, yeah, they should beat Tampa Bay, and I say they should because they have. That it's obviously there. And, it's just a matter of will they do it again with the changes that they've made, and it's a hard question to answer. One I'll have when we do predictions, but dude, when we get but hey, if you're going to be an optimist and say they do beat the Bucs, and then you have obviously whoever's in the way of the Super Bowl. So maybe the Ravens. Let's just say the Ravens if you get all the way there, and then on the way maybe you have Dallas, maybe you have San Francisco. Like, how far do you really think that this team could make it in the postseason? And you got to kind of play that game to yourself. Is it's yeah, you want to win. Everybody wants to win, but being realistic and not negative here, how do you are we telling ourselves that it's going to happen because something has to give, or are we telling ourselves like it's going to happen
No, I might have cut out just again. I'm sure Eric was about to arrive at a really good point. I think for me, like the saving grace of both the offense and the defense is that a lot of the issues they're having are simple and quick fixes. Like, I think the offense, the two biggest things for me that stand out are, one, the lack of hots. And by that, I mean, when receivers recognize that there's a blitz from the defense, they convert their routes from long routes to short routes. So they have a check down, whatever it is. We've seen how many times check downs have been open for Jalen Hurts. He's not really seeing them, but I think that's just because it's not a feature of the offense, right? We, talked about, Duck mentioned earlier, is like, it just seems like they're kind of gluttons for the long ball that doesn't work. And regardless of the success they've had with it, they keep trying it. But hots are a really easy install. And again, like, these are professional athletes. They've been doing it. I'm sure almost every offense they've done, probably since college, has had a hot in it, right? It's a very simple thing to install. So you can put that in a week. That's not a hard thing to do. And that changes your playbook so much. It gives you so much more. Like, this play now is 3 different plays, right? If we get this look from the defense, okay, it's going to look like this. If we get maybe cut coverage on the side. Okay, then the slot receiver is just going to hook up. Like there's so many little things you can do to change that. That's an easy week of install, and then you have it ready for the playoffs. And no one's seen it. No one's seen you do it. They're not prepared for that. So that's an easy adjustment. The second thing that's been really frustrating is the lack of play action. And even when they do play action, it's just not convincing. Brian's always on this about how it almost looks like a fake draw. Like no one's falling for it. Jalen's not really rolling out afterwards that often, except for on those third and short plays where they have what I call like the slip triangle. So they have like a guy coming across this way. They have another guy kind of hooking up. And it's a simple high-low read for Jalen Hurts. So again, like outside of those couple of plays, they just haven't put it in. And again, play action, super easy to install. Who hasn't run play action in their lifetime, especially as an NFL player? They all know how to make it look good. They all know how to make it look convincing. One of the easiest ways is just run under center, right? And that's another thing we have not seen, kind of, slamming the table for some play action under center. That's an easy thing to install in a week. That's not that hard to do. You can run all the plays you were running out of that same formation. You just bring them under center. So those are two really quick adjustments. Outside of that, I mean, you heard the announcers talk about when AJ Brown went down, you already didn't have Devontae Smith, how Julio Jones was your top receiver. Did we forget about Dallas Goddard? Like he's by far your best receiver still on that roster. He was fine. He was moving around. And for some reason, he's mostly sitting there blocking in 6-man protection. I do not understand it. That is your best receiver. Get him activated. The last couple of weeks, they'd actually been doing a good job getting Dallas involved. And then all of a sudden, they're worried about a little pressure, and they have him in blocking. Like he's your guy. Just give him the ball. Make it easy for him. Get the ball in his hands. So on offense, I feel like there's some easy adjustments. I was just talking to Eric about the nice thing and kind of the saving grace is a lot of these problems, as mind-numbing as they have been, and probably because of this reason, they are easy fixes. They're pretty simple things, right? Like we don't have any hots in the offense. So when the defense blitzes, the receivers just convert the routes to short routes, and you just throw the hitch, right? That will be easy. We've seen how many times Gainwell, for example, has been open for a check down. Like Jalen's just not seeing it, but I think it's because it's not part of the feature offense. And then number two, the lack of play action. That's 1 week of install. That's not that hard to do. So both of these things they could install in a week. And the nice thing is then the defense haven't seen it, can't game plan for it. And then the third thing I mentioned is like last game, you lost AJ Brown, you lost Devontae Smith, and then all of a sudden forgot that Dallas Goddard existed and started throwing up haymakers to Julio Jones, who, granted a legend, don't get me wrong, but Dallas Goddard at this point is a much better receiver than Julio Jones.
It's funny you bring up Goddard's name because your theory with Brian earlier about like how maybe they're just going to pull up the heist of the century. Goddard kind of said something that alluded to that a little bit. He was just along the lines of saying like, oh well, we got people returning for Tampa Bay and and kind of getting that in motion. Look, I agree that what you were just talking about, making the reach a little bit shorter for Hurts is going to help because every single thing that's completely downfield and there's no like gray area. It's a screen pass,
100%.
it's a draw, it's a downfield shot, it's a screen pass, draw, downfield shot. And if he has an intermediate game, then the rush is less likely to force him to one side because he has a tight end and presumably a big-bodied receiver who can play in the intermediate game there. And it's like, okay, pick one,
Right.
be decisive. And then once you do that, then it opens up a ton, so much more. And that's not even getting into the running game yet. So, by the way, geez, maybe maybe with the running game, they finally say, hey, we do have Penny. Like, I don't know. Maybe that's how that goes.
One of the things that I thought that Penny would be good at when they brought him in is pass protection, and we kind of saw it in the Giants game. I know he's out of practice, but he clearly needs some work in pass protection. I think that's probably why he's been sidelined. But he's running all right. He's running all right. I don't really understand the hold up on him getting the football out of the backfield, but pass protection looked a little rough.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it goes hand in hand with a lack of usage, and you and everyone else is getting those real life snaps, and I guess you're getting the practice ones, but there's a little bit of difference between those practice ones and those live ones.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, and I mean flipping to the defensive side of the ball too. Like I think that again is the saving grace is like a lot of these issues that we're talking about. Like we talked about dropping Josh Sweat into coverage on number 3. Like that is a simple fix. Just don't do that, right? Like
Right.
it's very
Right.
easy. And one of the issues why this has been so frustrating as a fan to watch is that it seems like it's so easy, it's so simple that we just don't do that. Just don't put your players in bad situations. So again, this is why I'm a bit optimistic for this game. Is I think that all of these problems are 1 week worth of fixing. Like you can just again change your defensive game plan so that Josh Sweat isn't dropping into coverage, so that Hassan Reddick isn't dropping into coverage. Like I can't tell you how many times I've seen another team just see Hassan Reddick on one side and run the ball at him because he is not a good run defender. And for some reason, the Eagles are steadfast on the fact that he's a good run defender. He's not. Similarly, we saw in run situations them put Nolan Smith as a linebacker. That's great. If he can go downhill and he can make tackles, fantastic. Do not have Nolan Smith covering a tight end who's a receiving tight end in space like Darren Waller. That is a bad matchup. Right. Again, like these are simple fixes, and this is why I'm kind of hopeful. But why it's been so frustrating is I think with a week of practice, you can avoid a lot of these issues. I don't see why they haven't done that already. But I truly believe that you can fix these issues. It's just a matter of whether they're kind of, again, put their pride aside and say, hey, listen, what I'm trying to do isn't working. And I think once they do that, they're set.
I mean, I agree fundamentally and holistically with your defensive analysis
Sure.
there. Like, no, honestly, like it's because the only other thing I would add to that is like, yeah, I guess the only way to improve this defense is health and make the side the coordinator again. So, like,
Right.
like it's the only other things I could possibly say about it because to me, and I don't want to harp back on it, but it's like I don't expect no matter what this defense does, to hold up with Mike Evans.
Yeah.
Or and by the way, I mean, has anybody really? This is a little bit different with Baker, I suppose. I haven't really followed the back end of it for Tampa Bay, but at the beginning, up until Philly, he was pretty clean as far as his play was concerned. It can't be all bad, and it's not all bad if you're in the postseason. It just can be bad at times, and I don't think the defense for Philadelphia can be described as it can be bad at times. I just think that they're getting wolfed down by whoever's over there. But again, situational play. If they can make a play here and there, that's going to be fine. But these plays, like these 3 to 4 plays, if you can make them 1 a quarter, they're going to define that game defensively. You have to get a stop. 3rd down. I don't care if it's dude. If I see another 3rd and 15 and 3rd and 15 plus converted, I'm going to lose my mind. I'm going to lose my mind. Like. That's one of my biggest pet peeves. Like even just and we were talking last week, about Tyrod Taylor, and I was thinking to myself, well, that's going to be the way that he damages his defense. He's going to throw that long ball, and he's going to get those third and long, to the point where I was watching the towards the end of the game back when they had who's in there? DeVito. They put DeVito back in. I saw the circle of life happen with the Giants.
Yeah.
But they put DeVito back in. I was like, man, if he starts moving downfield and converts this stuff, dude, like I even with the backup, it's just schematically, like it's not working. Doesn't matter who you have in there, it's just not working. We saw it happen with Howell twice, looked like Joe Montana. Like I'll always bring that up because it's so unnerving.
Yeah.
Yeah, the defense it's hard, but if Philadelphia is going to get into this game and they're going to, quite frankly, in my mind right now, I think. Isn't it wild that I'm going to even mention that Philadelphia, in my mind, is an underdog? Like they shouldn't be, but in my mind, you lose 6 out of your last 7, and you're an underdog going into Tampa Bay. I'm sure Vegas doesn't say that, but in my mind, that's what it is. And the offense is going to have to, be the one that carries the weight there. That's straight up.
Well, I think that's kind of a good time to segue into this matchup, and we'll get to your favorite time of predictions, but just quickly kind of highlighting. You mentioned Mike Evans. Tampa Bay still has some really good pieces on that offensive line. Have that running game that they can lean on if Baker is not able to play like he has been. But I think the biggest thing is that defense is still pretty fantastic. And I think kind of the key to this is the offense needs to stay on the field and give that defense a chance. Like we said, that they're just you mentioned that they're not to the point where you can say they're bad at times. Unfortunately, they're just kind of bad right now. And the only really way to fix that issue is by keeping them off the field. And so the offense is going to have to put together some drives, and we've seen them be able to run the football successfully. I think they're lacking some creativity that we've seen in the past from the run game, but as long as they're able to run the ball and control some of the clock, I think that they stand a good chance of, again, squeezing out a win. I don't think it's going to be super one-sided. I don't think the Eagles are really playing football the way that they should be in order to dominate this game, but I think there's a realistic chance. And I think on the other side of the ball, like you talked about, it's going to be Mike Evans. Like, can you slow down Mike Evans? Can you make Baker make bad decisions? And I think when the team is playing bad football, as Eric, again, is having trouble with the storm, but I think when the team's playing such bad football, especially on the defensive side of the ball, my message to that team is, hey, we got to be opportunistic. We got to take the football away. I think the only realistic way the Eagles win this game is if they win the turnover battle. And that's going to happen with these young guys kind of being what they were drafted to be. Is Eli Ricks was an opportunistic, they call him Pick Six Ricks for a reason. He's an opportunistic guy. You got to let him go and make plays on the ball. Keely Ringo, again, like a very talented athletic player that loves to play physical, that loves to go attack that ball. Like, my message to those young corners is, hey man, we need you to go make plays. And unfortunately that means giving up some plays as well. But the team's going to drive. Like, we've seen the Eagles get driven on over and over and over again. And the difference has been turnovers, right? In the games that they're able to create turnovers, we talked about how dominant the defense looked in the Dolphins game. I mean, the Darius Slay interception was the turning point, 100%. And so if you have one of those games where you're able to create one or two turnovers and the offense is able to control the clock, and limit turnovers, and it's kind of crazy to be talking about a team that has to play it safe. But I think on offense, like, that's what you're hoping for is control the clock, limit turnovers on offense. And then the message to the defensive side of the football is, hey, we got to create some turnovers here. Let those young guns go loose. And, I would love to see an Eli Ricks interception. I would love to see a Ringo interception, like a Blankenship. Like, one of these young guys has to make a play. And at that point, it doesn't matter how many yards Baker's thrown for. It doesn't matter if you've gotten the ball driven down your throat. If you get the pick at the end of the drive and it's your ball, it doesn't matter. So I think offense needs to control the ball, and defense just needs to come up with an interception or a fumble, and probably multiple.
Yeah, before this weather comes back and just like destroys everything. Let's just go out there. Let's just go out there and say Philadelphia, I think 24-17, Philadelphia. I think they will win this one. I mean, geez, I've said it for a while, and it just hasn't been going our way, guys. We know how the curse works, but I'm trying to put it to rest for the playoffs. Just help me out one time if there is a weather god. But no, seriously, 24-17 Philadelphia. And, dude, literally the epitome of take it a week at a time. So that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, and honestly, my prediction is going to be pretty similar. I wanted to say, I think before the Giants game, I think that I was going to say a high-scoring game, but I just haven't seen it from the offense to believe that they can put up anything close to 30. So for me, it's going to be 21-17. I think the Eagles put up a little bit, like maybe 3 touchdowns. It's weird. I feel like they sneak in a field goal. Maybe it's 2 field goals and a 2-point or something like that. But around the same mark, I think you're 100% right, and it's going to be a close game. But I think as long as the Eagles put themselves in a position to score and be the last ones to score, mostly just by I think Aiden from Birds vs. Boys calls it a "fuck you" drive, and I love that terminology because we haven't seen one of those in a couple weeks now, and that's literally what the Eagles need to win this game. Is they need to keep it close and then have one of those "fuck you" drives at the end. And that also is going to send a message to whoever playing next week, like, you cannot keep this game close. And I think that that's how the Eagles have a realistic opportunity to maybe make a little run here, is teams get scared when they're close. And the Eagles over the last couple weeks just haven't been able to keep it close, except for the Seahawks game, and then completely folded. But it wasn't even close. You didn't even give yourself a chance against the Giants, right? And I think you have so much talent on this team. That's all you have to do is give yourself a chance.
Yeah, and if they hold the Tampa Bay to 17 points, that's an incredible win for the defense, and that's
100%.
something to hang your hat on going into a much more challenging opponent. Nothing at this point is easy at all. This is the NFL postseason, and if they're to kind of borrow that that fuck you drive, we need to have those fuck you Eagles from that Buffalo game.
Honestly.
Yeah. And if that team shows up and they're just like, it's the postseason, let's get right, then this could be a new story. But until then, I'm taking it week by week, and I think there's a chance, but I'm not guaranteeing anything.
Yeah, we'll see. Either way, it'll be a good game, I think. And overall, like the playoff this year is going to be interesting because I think there's a lot of interesting matchups there, and I think there's a lot of teams that still have a lot to prove, even with the records getting them into the playoffs. So, looking forward to it. I mean, dare I say, I'm kind of looking forward to doing some draft research early this year. Yep. I didn't get the opportunity to do it last year, so not saying it's over, but obviously in the back of our minds, I think it could be an opportunity again to have a young, talented Eagles team, which we haven't had in a long time. So, yeah, a lot to look forward to. We're trying to keep it positive. It hasn't been the most fun season, especially probably one of the most nerve-wracking seasons of recent history, but we're still here. We're still kicking. So are the Eagles. They're in the playoffs. We will send out tweets if we're doing a post-game show on the Monday nights. With it being a Monday night, it's kind of late, but hopefully we'll have a post-game show. If not, we will see you on Tuesday. Thank you for kicking it with us. We'll get some reels out on IG, on Twitter, all that stuff shortly. So appreciate it. Eric, always a pleasure.
Morgan, hell yeah.
I forget how to end this, to be honest. I thought
I have an idea. I think I just point at the screen and I just yell, "Go Birds!"
And then I say yes, sir, which would be Brian's thing, and then I click this.
Flip.